Welcome to the Narrative Mindset Podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, I would appreciate it if you went back and viewed previous episodes when you get time. Thank you for tuning in. I always like to thank my viewers for tuning in, for taking time out of your day to tune in and listen to what I have to say. I really appreciate that. This is episode number 87. I put an episode up yesterday, but somehow I'm not sure what happened. It was like Spotify and they're still processing it. So that was a little bit different because that's the first time that it's happened to me. And I think it might have been because I was using a book title. I wasn't using the story, but I was using the book title. And I just took it and rewrote it in the narrative mindset kind of thing, whatever. But it is what it is. The show goes on. You learn, you live and you learn. I had a pretty good day today. It was decent. I'm not going to say it was great, but it was decent. Went to bed a little late last night, and I ended up getting up late this morning. Got up about 20, 25 minutes late. I mean, I still got up and got going, but I got up 25 minutes late. So it was a little bit of a shorter morning than I like. But as usual, I ended up getting up and doing my thing, coffee and TV and whatever else, and ended up getting out of here. But the surprising part was I got up and I look out my window and it's, snow all over the place. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I said, okay, I got to get out here because I don't want to work the weekend. And so I get out there, not a city plow truck in sight. I'm out there at 4:00. I didn't see a plow truck until probably maybe 7. I mean, that was like, wow. So I get out there and pick up my first passenger. And I'm coming up to a freeway on-ramp, the one when you get off the regular street. So there's a truck. It stopped. So we get around him. That's an accident. Then I get on the on-ramp, and there's another accident with a semi where you get off the on-ramp onto the highway. So we sit there for a minute. And remember, I got a passenger with me. So I sit there for a minute, literally 1 to 2 minutes. And I get out and I take my hoodie off because I always wear a sweatshirt and then I wear a hoodie over my sweatshirt. So I take off the hoodie, whatever, throw it in my trunk. And I'm sitting there waiting. I said, you know what? I don't have time for this morning. So literally, probably shouldn't be saying this. Me and the car in front of me, we bagged down the on-ramp around the truck accident. And then I take the back roads. And as you can see, I had this immediate feeling of like, you know what? I really wanted to go back home. I really, really honestly wanted to go back home. Because you got to imagine being out there, roads are full of snow. I could only go 25 miles an hour. You know, it was crazy. And you got these people who, for some odd reason, I'm not sure if people think because they get brand new winter tires that they're like invincible, that they can go the same speed as they did on dry pavement, and it'll never catch up to them, or I'm not sure what they're thinking. But every single time they fly past you, and later on up the road, you end up seeing them off in a ditch somewhere, you know, and they never slow down. You know, I saw a guy, you know, scariest shit ever. I saw a guy in a cement truck. You know, he was flying down the street. I go to turn. He passes by me. I happen to look back. There's a car that slowed down right on the other side of the intersection. You know, I mean, you're in a plow truck. So it's like, dude, you know, you got to be kidding me. But luckily, he ended up not hitting the person in front of him. So, you know, I give him a lot of credit for driving the heck out that cement truck, because I would have, you know, needed a couple pairs of drawers for that stunt he pulled. You know, there's no way that I'm ever driving a large vehicle in the snow, because I would completely freak out, you know, when the thing didn't want to stop. I mean, I almost freaked out driving a U-Haul on dry pavement, because their air brakes, the air brakes are delayed. So when you hit the brake, then it doesn't just immediately come to a stop. It's like, you're praying that you don't hit the car in front of you if you're not used to it. And I wasn't. So it was like, yeah, this is, I'll stick to U-Hauls. But I kind of want to discuss something. When I was younger, I've always had jobs, right? So I've always liked working. I've always loved making money. You know, whether it was cutting grass, whether it was picking up bottles, whether it was working in a factory, wherever I could go to make money and have and generate income and put money in my pocket. You know, I was all for it. So also growing up, I was around, had a lot of male figures, men that, you know, you had to be, there were certain expectations for standards set as men, you know. And there were certain things that they were just unsaid things that you did. Even if you didn't want to do it, you still did it because you wanted to be respected by other men. And that was just a thing. It's still a thing with me. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I think about. It's like, you know, I can't do that because I'm not going to be respected. That's just not what men do. Put it that way. So, and at one time when I was living with my mother and I'm making all this money, I think I was making more money than her. I was making, I think it was like $17 back in '98. I think she was making maybe 12 or 15 or something like that. So, it was already, she was happy for me. But at the same time, there was a question that was hanging in the air, a situation, should I say, that was hanging in the air also. So I remember my mother coming to me and she said, I think I was 15, I believe. And she said, hey, sat me down or whatever and said, hey, it's time for you to start paying rent. And I'm not going to lie to you. When she told me that she wanted me to pay rent, I looked at her like, man, I should be living with my fucking enemies. My own mother wants me to pay rent. Are you kidding me? I'm at home, Mom. And I was really like just all in my feelings about it at that time. And you got to remember, of course, I was raised by my mother. My father wasn't around, but that adds a little context to it. But, and then she said there were some rules around it to make things even worse at the time. You got to remember that I was like in shock still. So she says, you have to pay rent. I want all my rent at once. I don't want it in pieces. And it's due on the 1st. So, it took me a while to even to get used to it, because I don't know, it was just I think it was, number one, not having a father in the home, not having a father that was a father figure in the home and that type of thing. Because had I have had a father in the home that was, the father that I think a father should be, then, I would have been, my mother would have been weighted on hand and foot. She wouldn't have did no nothing. I would have been, giving her my check and letting her give me what was left over after, after, bills are paid and, she didn't, here's my check, take what you need, give me what's left over. But I didn't have a father in the home. My dad, he was a hard worker when he went to work, put it that way, because don't let me get into what my mother would say. She would say something totally different. So my father was, he wasn't in the home. But as I got older, of course, I look back on that and I really, really appreciate my mother for doing that, because, of course, we all know that it taught me a lesson. What landlord do you know that's going to, number one, take his rent in pieces? Number two, rent is not due on the 1st or the 2nd or whatever, and all the rent is due at once, and there is no, it's just straightforward. This is the rent. If you don't pay it, these are the consequences. So I thank my mother for doing that. And it was just like I said, being around real men and wanting to be respected by so men so bad, that you just stayed in line. And that was just the way it was. But I think I was talking to a passenger and we were kind of discussing, okay, when did this when did this disappear? When did it disappear? And he said, probably around 80. So I said, okay, we can we can go with that. We can go with 80. So that was what we kind of went with, because around about 80, if you ask me, that's when the whole manhood thing started to disappear in families, because you had younger and younger men and women that were making children. So therefore, you didn't really have the raising that they needed. They didn't have my grandfather, who was, to me, one of the greatest man figures that I'm aware of. My grandfather had 5 kids of his own. When he got with my grandmother, she had 5 kids that weren't his. As far as I know, he raised them like they were his. And then their kids, which really weren't his grandkids, we were his step grandkids. He made sure that we were the only, he was the real grandfather that we knew of. And then in his free time, he was a crossing guard. He helped other kids. So my grandfather was just a good person. And then even after he died, him and my grandmother gave money to everybody, and we split up, whatever, they had left or whatever, which wasn't a big deal. I wasn't even concerned about that. Wasn't expecting it or anything like that. But, it was nice. But these younger families, they don't have that type of mentorship or examples to look up to. You got these young guys who are in gangs and carrying guns at 14 and all this other stuff. And the only example that they have to look forward to is their father, who just got out of prison, or, their parents usually aren't together, and, just all kinds of stuff. So they have to dig really deep to find an example somewhere to go by, and some of them, they're just like, I don't really care about, examples and all this other stuff. And they pretty much just kind of do their own thing, which is fine. But, it draws you further and further away from actual manhood, which is really important in a young man's life, because it shapes who you are and the decisions you make. So I had another passenger, and it was an elderly woman. So I have conversations with passengers quite a bit. So she was talking to me, and I picked her up from a senior living area, and she was in the living area, and she was talking about how she was getting bills from her house. So we talked about it, and I said, okay, where's your house at? Oh, it's in Detroit. I was there for 60 years. I said, oh, okay. And she kept talking and talking and talking. And And I told her, I said, well, you might want to, you probably might want to consider selling the house. So she said, well, my son lives there. And we kept talking. And she said, well, my son and his fiance lives there. Then my son and his wife lives there. Then they have a food truck, and that's kind of up and down. And, I'm tired of paying bills in a house that I don't live in. So I said, okay. Number one, if you're 70-something years old and you don't live in your house, your son is living there, which is bad enough. But at the time when we were having the conversation, it was acceptable. So she kept talking, and I said, well, that's bad enough. Just your son living there. And you may have to pay a couple extra bills. And, it happens. Because I'm thinking that he's this kid. So then I said, but hang on. He's married. So he's considered a man. Not a boy anymore. Not, learning. You're a man with a family. That's number two. And then she says, well, I'm trying to, they have a food truck and it's not going that well. And she blamed it on Trump, of course. It's not going well, and with Trump and his tariffs. And I stopped her and I said, ma'am, number one, let's leave Trump out of this, because with or without Trump, you need to be a man, regardless. Men rise to the occasion. So that's number one. Number two, your son is not just your son and he's just trying to figure his way out and all this other stuff. Your son is a man. Your son is a married man. Stack them on top of each other. You're a man, number one. You're a married man. Then, oh my God, she made the mistake. She made the mistake of telling me that this dude, her son, is 56 years old. I almost pulled the car over. You know what? I almost told her, what's your address? Because we're going to go over there and tell this dude, if you don't get your stuff together last week and, move your mama away from the grave because you're killing her, she's elderly, got issues, and she over here paying your grown self and your wife bills because y'all want to live your dream on her dollar. It's like, dude, are you kidding me? Dream all you want to dream, but do it on your own dollar. Don't live vicariously through your 75-year-old mama at 56. And as far as your food truck is concerned, if the food truck ain't doing good, that's why they have regular jobs. That's what men do. When something ain't working, okay, I guess I got to go out and get another job. I don't want to get another job, but this balance sheet ain't looking right. It is, heading towards a negative, and we got bills to pay. So, I'll let you run the food truck, or we can run the food truck on the weekend, but we need to go out and get regular jobs. And the mother was like, well, I think I'm gonna have to tell them, and I'm gonna have to have a talk with them. I told that woman, ma'am, you ain't got that much time left. So that conversation is better to happen sooner than later. Because she looked like she was in her mid 70s, if not, latter 70s. She had issues. I was dropping her off at the hospital. She, was, how elderly people, they moving real slow. It took her, a good 5 minutes to get out the car. So, you got to be kidding me here. I was completely baffled because later in life, when my mother, she had a house that I was living in a subsidized apartment. So I had finally got a chance to, some people would say live the good life or get a break or whatever. Subsidized apartments aren't a break if you make a little bit of money. Subsidized apartments are a break if you make nothing, because you pay 30% of whatever you make. So it was a decent deal, though. I'm not going to lie about that. So my mother, she was trying to get a house on the east side of Kalamazoo. It was her boss's deceased mom's house. So she moved in, and it was going pretty good. She was trying to sell her house, but it wasn't going the way that she wanted it to go. So being a son, I thought about it like, and I honestly wouldn't advise this. Let's say that. I thought about it like, well, my mother, she's raised me. She's done so much, did a great job, and been through so much. So the least that I can do is move in this house until she sells the other house. So I talked to my mom, and she says, okay, it's a good deal. All you have to do is pay the rent this time, pay water bill this time, consumers this time. So I said, well, that'll work out, because that gives me a little bit of wiggle room in there to kind of get some things done. So I move in, and she had kept telling me, she said, well, I'm not a landlord. So I'm like, I don't know what that means. So I move in the house, and I'm kind of handy with my hands. So I look at the basement. I said, this is ridiculous. So I'll go get some paint the basement. Hey, Mom, paint the basement. Well, what are you calling me for? I'm not a landlord. Hey, Mom, I painted the living room. Well, I'm not a landlord. Hey, Mom, I rebuilt the front porch. Well, I'm not a landlord. Hey, I had some issues with the neighbors, and he was trying to tell me the property line was where it wasn't. Hey, that's good, but I'm not the landlord. So this kind of went on and on and on, and it was like, my mother, I'm being respectful, and sometimes the house needed a roof. So my mother kind of tried to, in my defense, the house was in my name, and I was paying the house payment, but the mortgage was in my mother's name. So the house technically was never my house. So she got mad at me and said, hey, because I told her I wasn't paying it because this isn't my house. Had you have told me when I moved in here that anything that goes wrong with this house is your responsibility. Needs a new roof, your responsibility. Needs, sewage dug up and rerouted, your responsibility. New porch, your responsibility. New windows, your responsibility. Then I would turn around and walk and went back home. Anybody would. Nobody's going to move in a house with the agreement that you're living in this house that you're not buying, but you're responsible for everything. Nobody's going to do that. So outside of that, that was the only issue that me and my mother had. And by the way, for the ones who say, you could have helped or whatever, I thought about it. I think I just got my taxes or whatever. So I gave my mother $4,000 towards the roof, because I was like, it's my mother, roof needs to be fixed. No, this isn't my house, but just did my taxes. I got this, this surplus of money that my mother doesn't have. So here's $4,000 towards the roof, and it was some other stuff that happened down the road, but I eventually, we had a disagreement and I eventually said, hey, get my name off that house and I'll never do that again. I'll never do it again unless I'm buying something. But my whole point is that when I wasn't living in the house and expecting my mother to pay, to help with the bills. No, I was living in the house and, being grown, I'm saying, okay, I'm living here. These are, it's not her responsibility to pay anything unless something major goes wrong with the house. Then I understand that. And like I said, I was a handyman. So with the fence, with the porch, with the basement, I took down the doors, put new ones up, painted the living room and fix a little bit of plumbing, that kind of thing. So I wasn't calling her for every little thing. But when the insurance people told her that the house needed a new roof, then she didn't have a choice but to put a new roof on. So that was the when she came to me about a roof and wanted to talk to me about it, but like I said, the guy, the 56-year-old guy with a wife in a house that his mother owns, and she has to pay anything that's not major is ridiculous. And to me, it's a miss. The manhood was missed somewhere, and to be older than me was like, it was like a shock. It was really, really a shock, because it's like I'm just not used to hearing that. I expected her to tell me the guy was, some young kid, 15, 16, 17, something like that, but, not 56. You almost ready for retirement and, you trying to put your mama in the grave, before her time by not relieving her of bills on a house that she don't even live in no more. So that was a little bit different. Only because of the era that I grew up in. It just wasn't that. Don't get me wrong. I didn't have a in-house father who was there all the time, and just the the type of situation that you look at when you think of a father. Didn't have it. But I did have a father that was accessible sometimes. And, he acknowledged that he was a father and, that type of thing. So, I guess you go figure that one out. But I dropped her off and I really had thought about that because we definitely had a good conversation about that because it was a different situation. It just wasn't something that me myself, it wasn't something that I could get over. So it was just a little bit different for me. And I'm not the perfect, Mr. Superman or anything like that. I just believe in when I look at every decision that I make, I look at it as if I make this decision, in my head, I'm looking at about 10 men standing in front of me. Real men. Real, no question men. Are they going to respect me after I make this decision? And I also look at it from a point of there was something that men did when I was growing up, and they were usually, they were old elders. You would ask them a question, right? Because, and I'll finish that statement here in a minute, but you would ask them a question, and they would, nowadays, well, let me finish. You'd ask them a question, and they would, whatever you wanted to ask them, they're giving you a straight answer. If you ask them, in domestic violence situations, you could say anything. Y'all got into it and she hit me and you could say she hit you upside the head with a bat. And the only thing that they're going to ask you is, are you bleeding? And you're looking at them like, am I bleeding? What? Are you bleeding? And you say, no. Okay, then. End of story. But, they don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear nothing you got to say if you ain't bleeding. And that was what went on in that era. And I was telling a friend of mine, I think, that nowadays you have to almost pre-apologize. Well, hey, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. So you have to soften them up before you say something. Back then, it was, they would cut right into your feelings. Wouldn't even tell you what they need to tell you and then turn their head. Wishing that you would say something or do something. Knowing that you over there where you were standing at, deeply in your feelings. You at the bottom of the pot of your feelings, digging. But they didn't care. It was just raw, uncut truth. Don't ask if you don't want a straight answer. Back then, grown men didn't play with kids. They tell you straight up, go on over there and play with them other kids. they would tell up and coming teenagers who tried to get in the men's conversation, hey, I don't play with other people's kids. I mean, it was just, it was a beautiful thing. Now that I look back at it, going through it, it was, it was almost like a love-hate relationship, that you really don't understand when you're going through it. But like everything else, if you like it, it's not good for you. If you hate it, that's what you want to stick with. Food that you like is not good for you. Food that you don't like and is nastier than crap, best thing for you. It's amazing how you can trace back most sayings back to their origin, and they mean the same thing. We were taught everything that we needed to know from birth, from growing up. But as adults, we took that information and, we kind of threw it out the window, unfortunately. Charlemagne was talking about something today on The Breakfast Club. And he was saying that, we have, I think he said we have 27 days. But the point was, you have 20-something odd days, we'll say it that way. In my book, what I would like you to do is I would like you to go through a simple step process. That's my process. You don't have to. But one thing about the process that I believe that if you go through it, and it's all free, if you go through it, you'll be a better person. I think you'll feel better. And I think you will have a different outlook on life. And it's just the steps that I took. And no, this is not a class. This is not something that I'm telling anybody to do. If you want to do it, feel free. But I know last year was when I made a decision to change my life and get healthier. So I'll kind of explain what I do. And like I said, some of you can take the information, don't have to. Number one, love yourself, right? And put yourself first, right? And my definition of love is basically you're doing something that you really don't want to do. So take that action and apply it to yourself. Everybody wants to lose weight. Nobody wants to go on a diet. Everybody wants to be a bodybuilder. Nobody wants to go lift them heavy weights. When you take that particular feeling and you make it a priority, that's the difference between love and being in love. You want to be in love with yourself. Because when you're in love with yourself, you're not only doing the things that you need to do, usually the things that you don't want to do, but you're making them a priority. You're making that feeling a priority. Once you've done that, you want to say, am I content in life? right? You're climbing up a mountain. You got these ledges. Climb, make a good distance, you got a ledge. Make good distance, you got a ledge. Make good distance, you got a ledge. Now, when you climb up and you get to the first ledge, you say, okay, that was pretty easy because it was a short distance. And then you keep climbing and you get a little bit of safety rope under you. I'll tell you what I'm talking about here in a minute. Each ledge is a point where you feel content enough to take a break, to just say, okay, I'll climb a little bit more a little bit later on, but I'm in a good spot in life. That's being content. The reason I said the safety rope is because a question that I would ask a woman is, if you were climbing next to two guys, they're both climbing, got these ledges, they get to the first ledge. One guy says, he takes a rest, I want to climb some more. Starts climbing. He's got a little bit of safety rope behind him. The other guy, he hasn't made it to the first ledge. He's still kind of hanging on and looking at the first ledge. He's almost there, but he's still hanging on. So it's like, as a woman, if you're going to fall, which guy do you grab onto? Do you grab onto the guy that's not only content, but he's gotten to a point to where he has a little bit of a safety net up under him? Or do you jump on the other guy who hasn't even made it to the first ledge yet? He's not content in life. He has no safety net under him. And if he falls, you fall with him. That's just a picture I paint for that. But you love yourself, you're content, happy. My definition of happy is something that I like doing that I literally will cuss you out if you call me while I'm doing it and it's not an emergency. It can be whatever you like to do. You like doing it because it makes you happy and you do not want to be bothered. It could be doing something with somebody else. That could be it. Which I wouldn't recommend that, but it's up to you. That's happy. You have to be peaceful. Get everybody out of your life that's not bringing positivity into it. Angry people, gossipy people, people that are acting funny, playing in your face, using you for money, yada, yada, yada. Get them out your life. Because you'll find that when you love yourself, you'll find that, like I said, you're doing things that you don't want to do really. But you love yourself enough that you're willing to make that sacrifice. Or those sacrifices, should I say. And then lastly, part of peace is something that I kind of take seriously, and I will do the next person that I start dating. And some of you may think that it's maybe a little much, but it's not. So when I meet a female, we'll sit down. Hi, how are you? Whatever. This. And after we introduce ourselves, I'll tell them to stop. Then I'll say, from this point on, for the whole time that you know me and we are communicating, do not tell me or involve me in anything that's not my business. Where you work, how many kids you got, what times your baby daddy comes over, whatever kind of situation y'all got, how many dudes you fooling with, what their measurements are, who you breaking bread with, all that stuff. None of it is my business, which contributes to your peacefulness. Too many times when we get in relationships, the very first thing that we do is we spend that whole first day telling each other everything that's none of each other's business. And then we get mad down the road when we throwing it all in each other's face. I've always been a big, I'm not going to say always. Recently, I've become a big person on remembering what somebody else told me earlier in life. As a woman, when you meet a guy, you make him the person the kind of man that you want. Because you have to understand that when you meet him, you're constantly planning information into him that's going to either help him or hurt him down the road. If you meet the guy and you tell him, or a guy, if you meet your mate and you tell them everything about your exes and baby daddies and whatever you do for a living, and all this kind of stuff, what happens? Immediately, they start feeling some kind of way because they're thinking about everything that you just told them. But if you don't, and you ask them, you tell them flat out, I don't tell because that's nobody's business. I don't want to know anything about you because that's not my business. Don't tell me anything that's not my business. Some of them who haven't done the work, men or women, will be kind of butthurt, but that's fine. They have to learn for themselves. As women and men, stop trying to raise your mate. It's nice, but it's either there or it's not. He either has the will to get up and go or not. If he doesn't, then unfortunately you have to move on. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Narrative Mindset Podcast.